Hi, everyone. Welcome to our very first in a hopefully series of front-end meetups here at Applifting. And first man speaking will be Lukáš Knápek from Applifting, our front-end tech lead, who will be telling you about how we use Next.js here at Applifting. So warm applause for Lukáš.
All right. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me in the back? Yeah, seems like it. Cool. So what I would like to do is do a bit of a retrospective on using Next.js at Applifting, or I'm just going to call it Next. It's much better. And this basically entails a few things. So the first one is we're going to just run through the basics of Next.js to get everyone up to speed, maybe for people who haven't heard of the framework before. Sorry. Then we're going to talk about how we use Next at Applifting and what have we learned since then or during that time. We're going to have a case study, one of our projects where we used Next.js to build a new version of an old site, which is all new, modern, and fast. Wow. And lastly, we're going to talk very shortly about the future of Next, like what's its current state? Is it even worth it to choose Next if you are interested in future features, and so on. So let's get started. OK, a little bit about Next.js. So what is Next.js, really? Good question. It's a React framework. That's not really telling much. But what this means in this context is that it does a lot of stuff for you in context of React. So if you were to install React on its own, it's just a library. It doesn't really allow you to do much else other than create components and reuse them, which is nice. But in real world, we have quite a lot of requirements such as routing, internationalization, image handling, styling, and so on and so on. And Next is the framework which does all of this, like I think pretty much all of this with zero config. So let's just run through the list. Pages routing, code splitting, bundling, TypeScript support, hot reloading, different page rendering modes. We're going to go in more detail. Let's just run through this really quick. So the main selling point of Next.js is that it provides excellent developer experience because all of this, you get all of this with basically zero setup. You don't have to create a configuration file. Or if you do, it can be just very lightly modified. But at the same time, you can configure it to be much more powerful and much more flexible to be used in your use case. So let's just run through the basics, right? So how does Next.js app look like? What does it work like? Like, how do you operate it? So here we have a Next starter project. This is literally just like Next create Next app with some routes added in. The first main point of Next is that it does routing based on files. So you have a directory. Oh, actually, I have a pointer while I'm doing this. You have a directory called pages, and this responds to routes in your app. So as you may expect, the root route is mapped to index.tsx, and then any other route is routed depending on the directory name. So for example, if you were to go to your website, /post/mypostname, it's going to get mapped to /posts, so here. And then this bit, which is a dynamic path. I'm not going to go into more detail because we're quite short on time to do that, but that's what happens. Additionally, you may have noticed that there's an additional directory called API. And as you may expect, this hosts the API routes in your app. So it basically specifies your API. And again, the same exact mechanism applies. Oh, by the way, API is entirely optional. You can use Next.js as frontend only. So it just hosts your frontend app, but you can have your backend somewhere else entirely. Right, here's another example of the routing. Again, same idea. We got API, we got posts, and then we get API/post/new post name, which is going to get mapped to API post select this dynamic path. So what this means is the implication of this is quite huge. It is that you have frontend and backend in the same repository, which might be confusing, and we'll touch more on that later. Okay, so we have our routes. How do we actually generate pages? There's two main ways to do that in Next.js. The first one is called static generation, and it's the default. So what we have here is a basic, it's a page in Next.js. And this page is React component. There's absolutely nothing special about it. It's just a React component that accepts some kind of props. These props are obtained by getStaticProps function. And this function runs on the server in the backend. And what you usually do in this function is get your data and then pass it as props to your page. And that's it. That's the entirety of what you need to be doing in order to generate a static page in Next.js. It's important to point out that this process happens at build time. So if you type in next build, I think, it's going to take a while because it's going to build all the static pages in your app. But then once those pages are built, they get cached, so you can access them immediately. This means that in your application, the transfers between static pages are going to be very, very fast. We'll see how that works later. The other major type of rendering in Next.js is server-side rendering. You might be familiar with that from other frameworks or from just React itself. But how it works in Next.js is very similar. We have our page, which hasn't changed. It's still the same page. What's changed is the method that we use to fetch the data, the content. It's now called getServerSideProps. So usually what we do in server-side rendering is we authorize or authenticate the user in some way and then fetch the data, which is what happens here. So again, the same exact principle applies. This process, however, happens every time you request a page. So you can immediately see some drawbacks for this method. Like it's going to take some time for the server to respond with a complete page. It's not going to be as fast as static page, but there are some benefits as well. What about navigation? It's actually very simple. It's just, there are two ways to navigate between pages in Next.js. Next.js uses client-side navigation, which means that everything, all the page switching happens in the app, not in the browser. So your browser still thinks you're on the one and the same page, while the app actually switches the components. Okay, that might make you ask, isn't this just going to load all the JavaScript at once? And the answer is no, it's not, because Next does automatic code splitting. So each page only loads the code it needs. Right, so to move between pages, we have two ways of doing that. We have the link component, which is the main page, and we have the use router hook. I'm not going to talk about the hook too much. It's not that important. The link component is very important, on the other hand, and it functions very similar to your average anchor component in HTML. This is because Next does this thing where they take a regular HTML component and then they build an abstraction on top of it to add more features to it. It's also important to point out that Next prefetches linked pages in viewport. What this means is that if you have some link in your viewport, like you can see it on the page, in the background, Next actually fetches the page. So when you navigate to the page, it's going to be loaded much faster. Okay, so we have our pages, we have our routes, we got pretty much everything. Then we got the API, and the API is basically, again, it's the same file-based routing. The API runs on the same origin as your front-end app, so you're not going to have any coarse issues. And the way it works is just like this. It's just a function. It's a function that gets transformed into a Node.js function, serverless function, sorry. Okay, and finally, you have your Next.js app, you have your front-end, you have your back-end. What do you do with it? Well, you deploy it, obviously, and there are many different options to do so. You can self-host it, you can use platforms such as Netlify or Heroku, which you probably know, but the best option for most use cases is Vercel, or Vercel. I'm going to pronounce it Vercel. What's Vercel? Vercel is a platform for static sites and front-end frameworks. That's not going to tell you much, but it's basically a hosting service which hosts your front-end app and also hosts your backend. And this is great because it was actually made by the same people who made Next, so it's like a natural fit. We're going to see the benefits of Vercel later on. But here's what it looks like. Right, so those were the basics of Next.js. We just really ran through them quickly. Now let's talk about Next at Applifting. So it turns out we use Next in several of our projects. It wasn't like a plan, it just kind of happened organically because Next happens to solve a wide variety of use cases that we happen to have. And during the time we've had those projects, we've learned to work with it, we've learned to get used to some of its quirks, and we've got a hang of its advantages and disadvantages. I'm just going to do a brief summary of those. So first thing that's worth mentioning is that Next presents a bit of a mindset shift if you have not worked with server-side rendering before, or if you have worked with server-side rendering but have not worked with hybrid rendering, which means using client-side rendering and server-side rendering in one application interchangeably, depending on your needs. So that was quite confusing because, again, you have your front-end and your back-end in the same place. It's just in the same repository, which, okay, it's extremely handy, but it's also confusing. So we needed some adjustment period most of the time. We had some issues or questions like, wait, which code actually runs on the server? Which code runs on the client? And it can happen that you have code which actually runs on the server and on the client at the same time. And in some cases, they can, the code, which usually would be a page, has its own separate React context for the server side of things and the client side of things, which gets quite confusing. And finally, the very common question, if you should call your API from those two functions we mentioned earlier, get static props and get server-side props, to which the answer is no, you use like those backend methods directly. So with that in mind, let's run through some of the things that Next does really well, according to our opinion. First of all, there's the rendering flexibility. We've touched on server-side rendering, static generation, but actually there are shades in between which Next handles as well. So this really all depends on your requirements. So let's say you're going to create a new page. Doesn't have to be, is the primary requirement for it to load fast, and is it not dynamic? Then you would use static generation. Next has your back. Do you need to load it fast, and does it have to update periodically, like not immediately, but like every once in a while? Well, then you would use incremental static regeneration. We'll touch on that later. What if you need a page that's heavily reliant on the current user, and it has to have good search engine optimization? Well, then you would use probably server-side rendering. That's like the most likely option. But what if you have a page that has to be user-tailored? It has to be dynamic, but at the same time, you can't afford to stress the server with each request. Well, then you just use the old client-side rendering, which if you have ever worked with Create React App, that's what you've been doing so far. So it's this extreme flexibility that gives Next its power. Also, it supports TypeScript out of the box. It's just nice. I have nothing to add, really. We just love TypeScript here. It supports CSS and SASS out of the box. The ways in which it does that is that you can use SASS out of the box, as I just said, but you can also use CSS modules or SASS modules. And Next even supports global SASS files, which means you can store all your mixins, all your typography stuff, all your colors in one place, and then access it globally from your app. Very nice. Okay, image optimization. Next has its own image component. Remember when I talked about the thing that Next does when they take like a regular HTML component and then they make it better? That's one of those cases. So Next images support lazy loading, which is great. It means that images only load when they are in viewport, when you can actually see them on the page. That is the default behavior. But at the same time, they have some other features, which, again, I'm not going to go in depth because that would take ages. It's just suffices to say that Next also optimizes images automatically. So it uses modern image format and decreases the quality so that it's still great, but you don't have to transfer so much data. All right, here's a demo of how the lazy loading of images works. This is our website, which is built with Next.js. And I just went to the blog section and I scrolled, and you can see that the images load with delay because they were not loaded initially. And I have to say, I had to throttle the network speed because the images were loading too fast anyway, so you wouldn't probably see it. So this is like with slower network speed, right? So you go to the page, you scroll down, and you can see that the images underneath your viewport are not loaded initially, so they load as soon as you can see them, which is really nice. Okay, fast refreshed apparently. Do you guys all know what hot reloading means? Maybe some of you know hot module replacement. These things are like an absolute must nowadays if you want to develop with any speed. What this means that when you make any changes to your component, to your page, or to your frontend in general, it does not perform a full page reload, but it only reloads the components or the section of the page that has been affected. And Next does this, of course. It does this on the component level, where Next tries to persist the state as much as possible. So, for example, if you make a syntax error and then you fix it within the same component, you will not lose the state. It will just refresh and keep the same state. So you're not like delayed by the refresh of the page. And here's a quick example of how that works. It's really some really basic editing going on in the left column, while on the right the changes appear immediately without full page reload. So that's very nice. It allows you to develop at speed. It just takes milliseconds to update the page. Of course, it gets a bit longer if you have a heavier page or a more complex app, but generally it's pretty quick. Okay, injectable head. Really quickly, again, Next has its own component head. And what this component allows you to do is to inject data into the regular head you have in HTML. So like what you store there, title, your metadata. So you can actually use it multiple times in your app. And Next then takes all of those uses and joins together all the data you've put in your head and puts it in the final head section of your final HTML file. And that's really nice, especially if you have some metadata which you want to add to the head that's dependent on the current page. Preview mode. You might know some content management systems which support preview mode. It means that you can view documents or articles or blog posts which have not been published yet. So Next.js integrates seamlessly with that. It just supports that. And here's an example of how that works in Prismic, where you edit the file, save it, so that you get your orange bar, and you can preview the changes, and then you see it as if it was on your website, when in fact it's not published yet. Okay, let's talk about Vercel for a bit. Vercel is great, and I'll try to explain why in a few slides. So for one, it supports environments. It supports 3 environments. You have your development environment, which corresponds to local development. You have your preview, which we'll talk about. And you have your production, which obviously hosts your final app publicly. What's great, though, is that each environment has its own set of environment variables. So you have your variables for development, preview, and production, because oftentimes you need them to be different. Like you have some sort of sandbox app where you try out new things, and it's not connected to the production database. It's not connected to the production content management system, and this allows you to configure these things really easily. So here's what that looks like in Vercel. Like here's where you add a new variable. You just type in the name, the value, and select the environments where it should be applied. And you can even select custom branches where it should be applied, which is really quite amazing, especially if you need some sort of functionality which depends on that. Here's the other part of environment variable setup in Vercel. This is your list of existing environment values. You can filter them by name, the environment, and you can also sort them. And you can check out their values, most of the time anyway. Okay, so we've talked about preview environment. What this means is that Vercel uses this environment to display all of your work in branches. So as soon as you create a new branch in Git, it gets mapped to a very own preview site, which works similar to Netlify or Heroku if you have ever worked with those systems before. This allows you to test new features before they are made public. Like, it allows you to isolate those features and test them on their own. Yeah, that's the wrong transition. Here's what that looks like in practice. So we have our Vercel integrated with GitHub, and every time we create a new branch or pull request, it automatically deploys the work to its own preview site. Speaking of integrations, Vercel has many. I'm just gonna fly by. It's just whatever you have, commerce, login, database, CMS monitoring, you can connect to Vercel and get it started, get it working really easily. So this is what the Vercel marketplace looks like, just to give you an idea. Okay, last thing about Vercel, which is great, is webhooks. What this means is that you can generate URLs, which when you hit with a request, cause one of your branches to be rebuilt, or rebuild the version of the app that's hosted on that branch. This is what it looks like. So you get your very own URL, and then you can use it to invoke a new build. For example, if there are some changes in your database, or rather a content management system where like the changes are not synced with the website like in real time, but there might be a bit of a delay. Okay, so Next has a lot of advantages, as I just illustrated. It has a few disadvantages that we found out, and they're interesting to talk about, so let's. Okay, app.tsx. In short, app.tsx, or rather underscore app.tsx, in the Next is the root component where everything else is hosted. You can customize it to your liking. That's great and all. But it's not a page, which means you can't use the data fetching methods in there. So if you have some sort of data which is like shared among the pages, suppose like labels or content that gets shown in the header or the footer, which is the same for each page, you have no easy way of doing that. Like, you have to use some sort of workaround, which is not great. The one we use is, or the one we use on the specific project I'm going to talk about is, it could be done better. It just goes against what Next offers, which is like developer experience, really. Next has some interesting internationalization limitations. So, for instance, or I should stress that its I18N support is pretty good to begin with, but there's not actually a language prefix for default locale. So if you have like your website in Czech and English, and you choose English to be your default locale, there's no like yourwebsite.com/en/whatever. The en is just not there. It's just empty, which is confusing, and it causes some other issues. See, we would expect this prefix to be there, but it's not. You can't do that easily. Well, you can do it with middleware now, apparently, but we haven't tested that yet. Okay, so there's also no translation for page subpaths. So let me give you an example. This you can't do easily as well. If you want to translate the subpaths like posts to příspěvky and so on, it can be done easily. Maybe it could be done through middleware, but not in an easy way. Okay, use SWR sometimes. Real quick, use SWR is a hook. It's a React hook that's based on SWR, which stands for stale while revalidate. It's a next-aligned React library for modern data fetching. It's supposed to be used in place of Fetch API, for example. But it's really powerful, but it's too powerful for most of our use cases, I feel. Because usually what you need to do is just fetch some data when your component mounts, and then you just work with it. If you need some sort of advanced use case, like you need to revalidate or refetch the data when you lose focus and then you regain focus, or when you go offline and then online, you can do that with use SWR. That's what it's great for. But if you want it to work like a regular fetch request, you have to use quite a lot of config. It's just not great. Okay, and middleware. I've said there is middleware in Next.js. That is very recent, and it's in beta. But the problem is that there is no way of cleanly reusing backend logic if you actually use the stuff in Next.js backend. So let's just leave it at that. Okay, and finally, there are some limits to Vercel as well. Many of them are imposed by AWS because that's where it's hosted Each of your Next.js functions is going to be an AWS Lambda. The one that's worth pointing out is environment variables. There's quite a strict limit, and you can hit it sooner than you realize. Okay. Okay, and one more cost. Vercel is quite expensive when you buy all the extras, but we don't have to go over that right now. Okay, the case study. So Crowdberry is one of our clients, and it's also a name for a project. And we've used Next for that project, and I would like to talk about how it worked, where it went well, where it did not went well, and so on. So what's Crowdberry? It's a chicken Slovak investment marketplace. There's companies and real estate developers, and you can invest in them for some sort of return. This is what the website looks like right now. It's just a number of investment opportunities you can invest into. Cool, great. So the old site they used was a monolith powered by a PHP-based content management system, which is not a great combination of words. It's not something you want to hear as a developer. It was sturdy, but it was showing its age. It was loading very slow. Further integrations were difficult. And it was not cloud-based, so the scaling was very limited. So the requirements for the new site were, it has to be fast, it has to use cloud-hosted CMS, it has to be able to provide immediate hassle-free scaling, and it has to have better security because it's quite difficult to keep a monolith updated usually. Oh, and also it has to support user-specific content. This is an important point. So our initial plan was, okay, like most of the pages are going to be static. There's no need for dynamic updates for most of them. So we can just use static pages and use client XHR requests for updates. So let's go with static generation framework, which, for example, is Gatsby. And we're going to reach the maximum speed. And we're going to use Firebase functions for backend. Okay, that seemed to work initially. But as we went deeper into the project, we realized that there's actually quite a lot of content that was user-specific and user-based. So we had to change our approach. And we started to rely on server-side rendering much more, which at the time Gatsby could not do. It can do it now. So of course, which framework could possibly do static site generation and server-side rendering at the same time? Next, of course. So we started using Next and Vercel. Okay, so we use Next to generate most of the pages because they are still static. And transitions to these pages are very fast. So here's some examples, but what you might be more interested in is a quick demo. So this is one of the pages. It's the news article list. If we check out how fast the page transitions are, you'll see that they're actually pretty quick. Like, except for the video loading, it all happens pretty much immediately because all of these pages are statically generated. So that's a key advantage of those pages. Okay, intermittent static regeneration. The use case, we had some static pages that we wanted to be fast, but at the same time, they had to be updated every once in a while. So what do? Well, we use intermittent static regeneration. It works the exact same way as static regeneration, except you specify the interval at which the page will basically refresh itself. And that worked really well. We use it, for example, for the careers page, which when you update it, you can have it update in an hour, for example. It's not time sensitive. Client-side rendering. An example of that is the dashboard. So we have our dashboard where we render just the skeleton server-side, and everything else gets loaded as the client asks for it. Because this is a private page, it does not need to have a good SEO, and this just was the best choice for this type of content. And finally, server-side rendering. That's what I've been talking about all while long. The idea is that users see different versions of the pages depending on the stage of their investment. So while this could be done in client-side, with client-side rendering in theory, it would be very poor UX because it would load the page full of loaders and the SEO would not be great. So we use server-side rendering. And let me give you an example. This is a detail of an investment opportunity that's visible to unregistered users. When you do register, you see this. And when you indicate your interest in investing in the opportunity, you see this. So the page changes quite a bit, and at the same time, you get the page as a whole. You just have to wait a bit longer than in case of static generation. Okay, internationalization. We needed to support 3 languages, and we also needed to automatically detect the language when the user first comes to the site. Fortunately, Next does this automatically. I'm gonna show you a demo of that. So just for illustration, we got probably EU, EN news, blah, blah, blah. This is the default locale, which does not have a prefix, as I've mentioned. And this is the Czech locale. So in this demo, I'm going to navigate to Crowdberry EU for the first time. It's going to choose English version of the site because my browser is in English. And then I go to some static pages, change the language a bit. It remembers my selection and then uses that language for every next visit I make to the site. So I'm going to switch to Czech. Then I'm going to go back to the main site. And it's in Czech now. Redirects, I haven't mentioned those, but the issue we had was that we had the old site to work with. And the old site, the users of the old site had a lot of bookmarks and history entries that pointed to the old site. What made matters worse was that the new site used a different paths. So we had to make sure the bookmarks the users had to the old site will take them to the new site, and the same resource adapts, for example, the same news article. Well, would you guess it? Next has a solution for that. It's called a redirect, and it can be quite powerful. So this is a simple redirect where you take whatever is at the end and then slap it to the redirected address. But it can get pretty complex as well. You can use regular expressions. We had a case like that where we had addresses that ended with numbers, and we needed to get rid of them, so we just used regex for that. CSS SASS support. I'm probably not going to go deep into that. I've mentioned it already. It's just that we've used that a lot. And it gave us a lot of benefits over using plain CSS. So to do that in Next, there's a few steps. You have to name your CSS modules a specific way. You have to tell Next about where your global style sheets are. And then you're sorted. You can just start using those global style sheets if you need to. OK, and short word on Next.js extensibility. So Next.js is zero config. You can extend the config, customize it to your liking, which was very relevant where we had to change some things related to Webpack. So for example, we use Webpack bundle analyzer, we use SVG loader, we use copy plugin, and there's some more stuff we do in the config, which again, you can do easily because Next exports this object where you have the entire Webpack configuration. OK, we use Vercel on the project, as I mentioned. Here's an example of the webhooks that we use. Right, and the use case is that data in the content management system changes in Prismic, and the changes should be reflected as soon as possible, but it doesn't have to be real time. So we have a webhook that triggers a build every time a document in Prismic changes. This is what it looks like in Prismic, by the way. OK, that was just a quick example of what Next is capable of in practice. Now in this very last section, let's talk about the future of Next, like real quick. It's going to be a real run through through the major versions. So right now, Next is under active and heavy development. While we were working on our Crowdberry project, we saw 3 major version releases, and each one of them has benefited the project a lot. So Next 10, we have the image optimization, the international routing, the fast refresh for data fetching methods, and much more. And at the same time, they managed to drop the package size by like 16%, which, wow, amazing. Next 11 introduced Webpack 5, which made our cache builds very, very fast, from like 8 minutes to 2 minutes, because there was not that much to rebuild, because we only changed some data. Again, some improved performance that we had to do nothing for, basically. Just like imagine you upgrade your framework and it just starts working like 20, 30% faster without you having to do anything. Speaking of which, in Next 12, which is the latest version, they've rewritten their compiler in Rust, which means it's even faster. Like you get even faster builds, you get even faster fast refresh, which was already pretty fast. And the impact it had on our builds was that it reduced our build times by several minutes, which was pretty cool. Middleware, we've touched on that. It's in beta right now. It has the potential to do a lot of stuff. And it also supports React 18, which means it supports all the React 18 goodies like concurrent mode, Suspense. You'll hear more about that later in the second presentation. So yeah, in conclusion, Next is an amazing modern framework that's actively developed and maintained. When you couple it with Vercel, it gives you an incredibly easy way to develop and ship new apps that don't have like very specific or extreme use cases. So unless you run into that scenario, your Next plus Vercel app is going to cover probably almost all of your needs, if not all of them. So in short, Next is a great tool to build modern websites with. And that's it for me and my retrospective. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lukáš, for your amazing presentation. Could you stay here with us for just a bit?
Absolutely.
Because we'll have a short Q&A session. So if any one of you has a question, just raise your hand. I'll come here with microphone. And if anyone on the stream has a question, write it to the Zoom call. And I have it open right here, so I'll just read out the question out loud.
Okay, hi, I have 2 questions. Do you still use Create React app for something, e.g. pages under authentication only? And the second one, have you also considered the new framework Remix, which has recently been open sourced?
We do use Create React App for some of our simple projects or projects that are not like that are more like MVP type of thing rather than like fully fledged app. So it still has its uses. I do work on a project that actually uses it still. And about Remix, was it?
Yes, Remix.
Yeah, I heard something about that, but we haven't looked too much into it. We usually like to see if a framework like catches on before trying to pour our resources into it. So yeah, maybe in the future, who knows?
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? I don't see anything on the stream yet, so right.
Hi, I would have a question. Like, I used Next.js in some projects of my own, and like many times I looked like it looked really exciting for the first time, like doing all the things you talked about. But then always like I wanted to do something specific, and then I need to go like all the way around and implement my own hacks to it so that it can bend to my will. Do you experience that as well, or you are just like straight path to heaven?
Yeah, we've had some of those cases as well. I mentioned a few of those in the presentation. But yeah, sometimes it's really hard to get Next to do something extremely specific that's like specific to your use case or domain. And in that case, what you usually do is go to GitHub/Next and then see if anyone else has that problem, has worked out a workaround. And if not, you just shout at Next developers until they implement that, which seems to work usually. They actually do take user feedback into consideration. So for example, with the middleware bit, that can be now used to fix the default locale problem. They actually released an article on how to do that. So that's amazing that they actually take the feedback into consideration.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any more questions? I don't see anything on the stream, so.
There is a question on Steam.
Oh, okay. I don't see it, so just let me read it out. Yeah. Is there a way to protect the API pages in Next.js?
Yes. You would use, if you're talking about the API pages, you would use the usual mechanisms like either OAuth 2 or just JWT token on its own. We do use, on the project I mentioned, we use file-based authentication. So in the front end, the user logs in, they have a token, and they use that token to communicate with the API. So the API, first of all, checks if they are allowed to even use the endpoint, and if so, it processes the request. So I would say it's very much the same as in any other framework, or if you were to use serverless functions on their own, it would be practically identical.
Okay, thank you very much for the answer. I believe it was satisfactory. So, any more questions, either here or on the stream? Seems not. So, thank you very much for your time and for the amazing presentation, and also for the answers. And as we will approach our next speaker, Honza, we'll have a 5-minute pause just to freshen up, and we'll be here back at, let's say, 18:55. So freshen up, and I heard there is a quiz right there on the QR code on the blackboard right there. So if you are interested in winning some prizes, just go ahead and try it out. Okay. Okay, so next presentation is about to start. So if you could take a seat and be prepared for Honza from DNAI. And Honza is the front-end tech lead and my dear friend. And so I'm not a front-end developer per se because, well, I only dabbled about 2 times in that. And I'm an iOS developer. And we do have one big thing each year, and that's WWDC conference. and that's in June. And I heard that there's something similar, exciting coming to your world, and that's React 18. And that's what Honza is talking about, so take it away.
It's going to be very exciting. Okay. Guys, in advance, this is my first talk in English, so it's going to be, you will have to bear with me. Let's go. So what are we going to talk about today is React 18, and the title of the talk was cool new stuff in React 18, but it's kind of a lie. It's not going to be about the stuff that's in React 18 per se, but more about the stuff that's in the future. Some of it is in React 18, some of it it's not. We will see. We will touch on Suspense, which is something that has been with React since a long time, but now has been getting some very exciting updates. So that's coming great. And most importantly, we are going to talk about server components, which are amazing and can be quite controversial, which is the thing that I want to discuss in the end, which is that server components could replace APIs. So sharpen your pitchforks. It's going to be fun. So okay, so brief overview of React 18. I'm not going to talk about most of it. So React 18 is going to bring a lot of new features which are kind of hidden from the users, which are basically made to like improve the user experience without like impacting the developers and without us developers worrying too much about how to use them. So the first thing is the concurrent mode. So the concurrent mode basically enables rendering parts of the applications when they are needed and not rendering them when they are not. Like it's a speed improvement. There is a lot of hard work behind it, but like for us developers, it shouldn't have that much impact, I hope. Another great speed improvement is automatic batching, which is like when you have multiple instances of state in your components. For example, I have like one use state for this variable, second use state for this variable. And when I do some kind of huge transition, right, I update most of the state in the application, or at least most of the state in the component. I update both of these like use states, and how it works right now is that React renders the application twice. For every use state, for like every state change, it renders the application again, which is obviously wasteful and slow, and we don't want that. So we are going to have some speed updates here. And now something that I'm going to talk about today is streamed rendering, which is again something that's behind the scenes, but is actually very interesting technically and will allow some of the like amazing features that we are going to see later. I'm briefly going to talk about Suspense and React Lazy. You will see that. And then I'm going to talk about some features that are coming down the line and which are currently not planned for React 18. And by the way, there is like some confusion in what's in React 18, what's making the cut, what's not making the cut. So I can apologize. When doing this research, it was confusing for me as well. What is actually coming and what is like coming sometime maybe in the future. I was kind of hoping the React 18 would be released by this point, but it's not, and it's not gonna be released for a little while yet, and some of the features are outscoped, so we will see. Okay, so Suspense. Suspense is something that has been in React 18 for a while, and I think that most of you have heard about it. But for those that have not, Suspense is something that lets you wait for something else to load, right? It's a component that lets you wait for child component to load. So in this code example, we have like the other component that's laser imported, which means that it's not like if you have Webpack implicitly like bundles everything together into one big JavaScript file. And if you do this import thing there, it means that Webpack is gonna bundle it dynamically. It's gonna load it dynamically when this code is run. So you can split your application into smaller chunks, and the React lazy does wrap this lazy loading, and it basically allows to split your application into small chunks. So the Suspense here, it has a fallback, which means that when the other component is loading, this diff loading is shown. It's not rocket science, right? And so Suspense is for lazy loading and code splitting right now. So this has been in React since 2018. I don't think that many people use this actually. I think it's for more library authors, the people who write Next.js, or the people who do everything on their own and don't use frameworks. They use this, but most people don't. Yeah. Lazy load parts of your application, yes, with placeholder, okay. So that was Suspense, right? Suspense is kind of easy. So a new thing that's coming is streamed rendering and SSR, or streamed rendering for SSR. So Lukáš has talked a lot about SSR, and that's great. So we are going to use this in here. So streamed rendering means that when you are doing server-side rendering and you are rendering the React on the server, you can stream chunks of your applications when they are ready to the client independently. What that means is you have a web page, and it has main content and some sidebar or whatever, and the sidebar loads slowly and the content loads quickly, or vice versa, doesn't matter. And you can now stream parts of your applications first and the other parts later. So previously the whole page would just pop into existence at once, and now it can load progressively and be better experience for the user, because user can see something faster. So this is different from HTTP streaming. For those of you who know HTTP streaming is if you have a document that's coming from the server, it streams line by line, which is kind of cool, not used very much, I think, but this is different. You can stream things independently of where their position is in the page. So you can stream the footer first and header last is the point. Yeah. We are going to see some demo of this, of how this works in practice later on. So bear with me. And so now the cool things, right? So Suspense for data loading is something that I don't think is actually coming in React 18. I'm not sure here. But what Suspense for data loading does is extension for the Suspense that we have seen before. And the Suspense that we have seen before is for loading JavaScript, is for loading files and parts of your application. And this is for loading data inside of your application. So on the right, we have a component that's loading something from the server, it's using some kind of, I don't know, HTTP post. It's using query. It's loading some data, right? And it's showing the data it's showing movies in a list. And on the left, we have some kind of wrapper that's just allowing the user to search for the movies, and then the search variable is sent to the search results on the right. And what we see here, I'm not sure if my cursor, yeah, it is visible. Great. So what we see here is we have Suspense, which is waiting for this results for this query to load. So while this query is loading, while it's fetching the data from the server, we actually show this placeholder, this loading diff here. So So this is something new that you could have not done before. And this is something very cool, I think, because like, for example, Apollo for GraphQL, it has its own mechanism for like showing the loading state, and like SWR has its own loading mechanism. And like people use like their own custom things for like handling loading, and that's great. But this is better because it likes make the whole ecosystem like use the same thing, which is very important. So this is hopefully coming. It's for loading API calls. I've talked about that. It allows you, or the intention here from the React developers is that you should like start this query before actually loading this code. This is kind of interesting, and I think that this is the reason why it's not shipping right now, because like the ecosystem is not there yet to like support this pattern, and it means that you kind of should have called this call outside of the scope of the function and like preloaded this call. So like when this code is actually loaded, so you can like load this component at the same time that you actually load the data for this component. I don't have any examples because like this is in development, so there are no like best patterns how to handle this, and we will see in the future how it actually works. But the intention is to load the data at the same time that you load the code. Okay, so now the coolest thing in React in a while, I think, and that is server components. So server components are a way to run code on the server, to run React code on the server, and basically inject the results from that React code into your client application. So you can run some components on the server, some components on a client, and you can mix and match them as you want. And you can basically combine the results. So this is also very like controversial what I have done here. So please just wait. So what we have here is like a server component which is doing an SQL call. Like this is right now this is impossible in React, right? But or it's possible with SSR, so okay, whatever. Let's talk about it later. So here I'm doing a database call, something that's only possible on the server, right? You don't want to like share the credentials to your database to the client, and you don't want to call the database at all in the client because of hackers and because of like performance, and like you can't load like native extensions for SQLite in the client, right? So this component, this build one, only runs on the server, but its results are actually visible to the client in the browser in the same React tree that you would normally build. So and it's like loaded through Suspense. So how this works is like the same example as before. I search for movies and I get a page that shows the results, right? But instead of calling the API, I actually call some internal call or database in this case, and I show the results instantly or immediately. I don't have to write the API middleware, basically. We will get to that later. So the Suspense shows loading until the search results load. And when I change the search parameter, when I like write something else to the search box, it automatically refreshes. So when I type something else to the search box, it's gonna again call the server, and the server is gonna like rerun this component, this whole component, and return new HTML that this results in, which is something incredible, I think, and we are gonna see some use cases later. Server components are coming in the future. They are kind of available in Next.js right now. It's all very experimental, and they all say like, don't use this in applications, like use this use this for testing. Don't build applications with this. And I've tried it, and it's very rough right now. Yeah, different components on the backend, different components on the front end. You can also run the same component on the backend and on the front end, and that's going to be most components, right? Because most components don't like call the database or do some front end interaction. So you can like do some heavyweight and secure things on the backend, which can be like doing the database call. It can be like calling the internal API. It can be rendering like Markdown or loading some heavyweight library to do some like heavyweight work, which you don't wanna like. You just need the results. You don't need the code in the browser. And all of this, like this is like okay, great, I guess. Like Next.js can do this today, right? Next.js like can do SSR, and like you can do all of this on SSR, and it's great. But now you can like combine the components which are on the server, on the client, while retaining like fully SPA-like experience. So it's fully interactive. It's like it's something new entirely, I think, from what Next.js is doing today, from like what PHP is doing with Hotwire, what like all of these new cool frameworks that are like popping up, they don't do this, and this is cool. Okay. So some components on the server and some components on the client. So not everything can run on the server. For example, you can really do like forms on the server, right? You can do state on the server. You can do animations that just doesn't make sense on the server. So you can only do that on the client. So for example, if I have like a form that I need to fill, I need to do that in the client component. And yeah, this is a great visualization from Shopify. Shopify seems to already be using this, or at least they have documentation for how to use this, which is really cool. And Shopify is like used by 1 billion shops around the world, so it's going to be used very much. And it shows that that like you can mix and match different components, and like the tree can be whatever you like. It doesn't have to be like only server components, only client components. It doesn't have to be that server components are always descendant from the client components, or vice versa. It can be mixed and matched. Now, this is how it should be. This is not how it currently is in Next.js. I'm not sure if that's going to change or not. So like that's one of the sharp edges of Next.js right now. Okay, so now the controversy, right? At the beginning, I said that you can replace APIs with server components, and or let's leave it. Let's talk about server components for a while yet. So server components are amazing because like they improve the user experience, especially if the user has like a bad connection. So for example, if the user imagine like something like YouTube, right? Some site that is very interaction heavy, and but at the same time has some static content, and like can use like and it's at the same time like accessed from people all around the world, and the people don't necessarily have the site preloaded. It's not like a business-to-business application. So server components improve like user experience for users with connection. Yeah. They enable us to use the backend mechanism safely on the front end, so that's the database calls. We'll talk about that later on. Highly interactive applications without APIs. That's what I'm gonna talk about, and that's the same thing. I'm not sure, but I have it twice. Okay. So yeah, so let's talk about the API angle. So server components could replace GraphQL in theory. And that is because, from my experience with working with applications for the last X number of years, it's usually like we have one server, one backend, and one front end. And like between that, there is like GraphQL, and that's great. But and it's great for like us front-end developers because we can pull the data that we need, and we don't need to overfetch. And like it's great for the user because there is no like latency waterfalls and whatever. That's great. But like for backend developers, in practice, GraphQL can be pain, especially around like authentication, authorization, and like data loader pattern, which isn't really a thing in some ecosystems. And like when the client can execute any query they wish, the hacker can also execute any query they wish. So you need query pricing or whitelisting, and subscriptions, which is GraphQL's way of doing two-way communication, is like poorly supported in some ecosystems. Like for example, in Python, subscriptions are kind of not there, and like because it's an advanced GraphQL feature. But server components could replace GraphQL, and that is because you don't need to have an API when you can just like call an internal API or just query the database, right? You don't need API that's there only for the client, that's there only for the front end. When the front end can just call the internal services which use like REST, and there are many services, and they can like use like gRPC or other protocols as well, and there is like a lot of possibility that this could actually open. And like this allows us to basically not do overfetching, because when you have internal APIs but you still load the server component does all the hard work and fetches all the things and has loads of data, but to the browser it only sends what's actually necessary. It could improve the latency a lot, because again the heavy work, the calling the APIs happens on the server, not on the client. And it's safer than GraphQL, because the logic that the components does is like exposed, or the components API is exposed, not the actual GraphQL endpoint itself, which can be huge and expose a lot of things. This automatically basically does like query whitelisting. So this is GraphQL, but not everybody uses GraphQL. And lots of people use just like REST and like backends for frontend, and that's fine, and that's great. But like backend for frontend is a pattern when you develop a specific backend for your frontend, and so you have to do additional work which you don't want to do. So you create like a generic API from all of your services, and then we get to the like bad latencies and overfetching and stuff. So server components could help here, because you don't need to worry about like the current design of frontend and which features does it need to show on the page to like load the data. In a sense that that's the issue for backend for frontend, because like when the design changes, you need to add more stuff to the backend for frontend. So another thing, you don't need to worry about like CORS, and a lot of people have issues with CORS, and it causes pains. And especially if you have multiple API endpoints, there are CORS pains usually. And if everything happens on the server, on the local network, there is no more CORS issues now. It's great. Some people solve like CORS issues and like security and discoverability with API gateways, and that's okay. But like API gateways is another piece of like thing that you need to manage, and I don't want to do that. And like people don't maintain their mappings in the API gateway, and server components could basically do the job of the API gateway and basically expose only the things that are needed. And the last thing, which I think is not really obvious, but I think that lots of popularity with REST and like JSON APIs is because the client, the browser, only supports JSON and only supports like HTTP calls. It doesn't do gRPC, it doesn't do Kafka and like other backchannel protocols. It doesn't do like two-way communication, right? So we kind of settled on REST and JSON APIs. But now you don't have to, right? You have gRPC, which is binary. You have Kafka, which is like backchannel communication, and you have all of this ecosystem of like different protocols that you can use, and you are no longer limited by JSON, which is something that's incredibly powerful, I think. So, okay, thank you. That's all. So now it's time for pitchforks and tell me that this doesn't work.
Thank you very much for the great presentation. You definitely had me going there because those server components look amazing. And yeah, I'm not even going to talk about the suspense it built. So.
It is a great suspense waiting for the server components to drop, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, does anyone have questions before I reach out for the stream? I see the first one there, and I'll go back to you in a second.
Hi, I would like to ask about this no API approach. Is there any performance comparison to the old API model?
Yeah, there is no comparison. I don't think that there are many people who think about it like I do. And honestly, I don't think it's gonna catch on. I think it's like a wild idea that's not very architecturally sound, but it's interesting nonetheless. And I think that performance could improve dramatically, but like that's my suspicion, right? That's not a benchmark.
Hello. You talked a lot about the server components, and I'm excited about that as well. But I feel it's like in a far future.
Yeah, that's true.
Because like I am waiting for React 18 like for ages already, and nothing's coming. But you also talked about the streaming rendering.
Yeah, wow, I didn't mention it. Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and I actually tried it for myself, and I would like to know your opinion about that. Like, if you tried it, and what do you think about it? Because like it looks interesting, but what they are doing, like as you said, like you can stream the header, the footer first, and then the header.
Yeah, I apologize. I had a link here for demo, but I don't have it anymore, which is unfortunate. But it works. I will have to describe it. I'm so sorry. Because like the demos online are just not really findable, I think. It works in a way that when you are loading a component, it's actually injecting a script into the page, which like injects information into React, and React then acts on this information and like renders the component. So there is I think I mentioned like a protocol that does this. That's gonna be used for the server components as well, where the server components like send a special format that's like serialized React components plus like serialize their props and like their data. And it's like it's completely new format, right? You're not gonna usually look at it, but it's there. And it's gonna like stream the information from the server to the React that's running in the browser and inject it as a script, and the React is gonna take the stuff from the server and render it. I don't know if this answers your question at all.
Well, I was more interested in if you would use it in a real life project, because the way you describe it, how it works, it looks a little bit crazy to me.
You mean the stream?
The injection of the vanilla scripts along as the stream is going Like that looks a
Yeah.
little bit crazy to me. So I'm interested if you would use it in a real life project.
Well, I think that everybody is gonna use it in real life project because they won't have a choice, I think, because like the Next.js is gonna implement it and it's gonna be transparent to you as a user, and it's gonna just happen if I understand things correctly. So this is just a thing that's like gonna be happening, and like you don't. As a developer, you shouldn't really worry about it. You can use this new feature, so you can like sprinkle suspenses everywhere, and now your application like loads independently, like the pieces load independently, and it's gonna make better experience for the user. But if you are just gonna like upgrade to newest version of React or Next.js, it's just gonna be there, and I'm not sure if it's gonna even be like used. I think it's gonna be, but yeah.
Okay. So any more questions? I don't see any on the stream, so. Okay. In that case, thank you very much for your answers. Thank you very much for your questions. And we'll have another 5 minutes before I introduce our last speaker for tonight, which is Georgi from Pipedrive. So stay tuned and freshen yourselves up. As I said, there's the QR code with the quiz. I was told that you can't win the prizes, you can actually take the prizes if you just fill it in, so that's better. So go ahead.
Thank you.
Hi everyone. It's time to get back to the talks. So please take your seats. And so the next speaker is Georgi from Pipedrive, as I mentioned earlier. And I'm pretty sure that most of you as front-end developers use quite a lot of developer tools. The console from the web browser. But I'm not entirely sure if you are using it to the full potential, but I'm pretty sure that Georgi will explain to you that you don't, because he will tell you some secret shit about it. Take it away.
Thank you. So are we good with this? Yeah, we're good. Okay, I have the hard task of going last, right, after the two great presentations. On the other hand, you're all tired and a bit drunk, so that's going my way, right? So yeah, I'm here with the presentation of using DevTools like a pro. It's probably not going to be like a pro, it's more like using DevTools in the first place. The last part is questionable, but let's roll with it. So yeah, my name is Georgi, I'm senior front-end engineer in Pipedrive, and a bit about myself. So you can find me under this nickname around the internet, right? Which looks like typo, kind of. You should go check out the GitHub stuff. There's plenty of open source, interesting stuff I collected or created over the years. In Pipedrive, I'm part of front-end platform team, which is super fun. And right now I'm focusing on global GraphQL adoption. So when Honza was talking about replacing GraphQL, that wasn't really going well for me. But yeah, I'm hoping that's not going to happen anytime soon. Anyway, I have a story about that. A few months back, when we were kind of pitching it to the rest of the company, we were drinking with our CPO in Tallinn. And I was like, okay, I need to go to hotel room, prepare that presentation for tomorrow, right? And he called it, I'm going to hotel room to Google last minute, what is GraphQL? Which is not true at all. We've been Googling GraphQL for 2 years in Pipedrive. And we know everything about GraphQL, we just need a plan, and now we have the plan, right? The presentation ended up being one slide, but it's my main job right now, so I guess it went well. A bit about Pipedrive, because that's who sent me here. So the information might be a bit outdated, but we were founded in 2010. And so about the funding, we have the unicorn status, right? So after the acquisition by Vista last year, or yeah, a year ago, yeah, we're a unicorn now. Super fresh news, we have 100,000 customers now, which is, I don't know, it happened like 2 weeks ago, and we had an internal game of like, guessing when is it gonna hit that number. And we have 900 employees in 9 offices or in 7 countries. I'm not sure about the offices because, you just kind of lose track. Now to the presentation. I actually did the stupid decision of making it kind of live demo, and that always, doesn't work out. But let's roll with it. Hopefully it's gonna be fine. And most of the presentation, or it's kind of half and half, right? Some of it is some of it is like new stuff in Chrome. Some of it is something that I use and I like. The DevTools topic is all kind of super big, and you need to just pinpoint a little stuff, right? So hopefully I picked the important or useful stuff. So let's start with the main one, and that's how to get into the DevTools in the first place. I needed some project to show it off on, right? So this is my site. Usually you would go and do inspect element, right? But there's this shortcut, which is Command-Shift-C, and that will open up the DevTools for you together with this kind of element selecting thing, right? So you can inspect specific element. So that's like quick way how to get into DevTools. I think there's some shortcut for like getting into DevTools without selecting the element, but I don't know that one, so you need to Google that. Then there is 2 other shortcuts that you should know, and that's Command-P. That opens up this kind of spotlight thing that lets you kind of open up super quickly some kind of any file within that project that you have or page that you have open, right? So let's go for app.js because there's always some app.js where we can open up the file. And the second one, so that was Command-P, right? And the second one is Command-Shift-P, and that's the same thing but for commands. So there's plenty of commands in Google Chrome right now that you can, I don't know, do all kinds of tasks. You should go ahead and kind of explore it. But for example, you can do screenshot, full-size screenshot of the whole page. Previously, you would have to do like have extension for it or something like that. Right now, you just do it in DevTools, super quickly, super easily. Great stuff. I have like 10 screenshots of those. Okay, so that's the main part about like getting into DevTools and working with it, right? Let's get into some more interesting stuff. So breakpoints, that's something that I feel like on the back end has been like essential for developing for a long time. On the front end, we kind of get away with not using it for the most part, I think. All right. So I have some code prepared here that we can check out and debug, right? So let's open that DevTools.js file, and we can see that code that I prepared. Usually you would just put the breakpoint in, refresh the page. Once that code is running, you can see that it stopped at that point where it's the breakpoint. You can inspect the variables, values. You can, see that you can see the value of even of this object, right? Which is like you're always uncertain in JavaScript. What is this? So that's super helpful. But not that many people know that you can actually just write debugger inside of your code. You don't need to go to browser. You don't need to search for all of that stuff. Once that code runs, it stops there, does completely the same thing. And yeah, you just don't need to do all that stuff of finding the same file in the browser. All right, so is that big enough? It's big enough, right? All right. And that's first example and kind of the most basic one. Let's look into the conditional breakpoints. I think that's pretty new. So we have this array of like food, which is chocolate, ice cream, burger, hot dog, obviously. But let's imagine that we have, I don't know, array of 1,000 of items, and we want to filter out some and just stop it on the execution on one of them, for example, right? So again, let's go into DevTools, and I want to go through that array, but I don't want to stop 1,000 times on it. So what I can do is add a conditional breakpoint now. Let's make a condition of index being, I don't know, 1, and leave it there. Once we refresh the page, the breakpoint is actually going to stop only once, and that's when index is 1, which is ice cream, right? I guess this is not really a practical example, but I guess you get the point. So that's conditional breakpoints. Let's move on to something else. I think this is my favorite, actually. And that's, I actually hit this in production, right? And this was actually a problem. So usually you would have this error handling of some sort, where we cache the error, and then we console log it. You can see in the console that it's actually console logged, right? But let's imagine we don't have that handling. We're just catching it and discarding it. That can happen in your code. It can happen in some external library or anything like that. And it's super painful when it becomes a problem because there is no error to kind of find, right? There's no issue that you could see. So what DevTools actually allow is this thing, which is pass on caught exceptions. Or maybe just this. I don't know. Okay, let's refresh the page now. The error is going to be thrown. It's going to be discarded, but we still pause on that exception. And that's great, because this way we can still find all those discarded errors. And yeah, as I said, this is something that I actually have from production. It's going to catch some more errors, right? Those are probably from like extensions or something that I have in the browser. But yeah, this is something good to know and good to use sometime in the future, I guess. I think this is it for the breakpoints. So let's move to the next part, and that's network blocking. So most people know that you have this super cool thing of network throttling, right? So you can slow down the network to something less speedy and see how your page is seen in, like, I don't know, India or something. But there is another feature, which is like blocking the request altogether. So you can block the request URL, or you can block the request domain altogether, right? So let's block the app.js file, which is like most of the JavaScript on the page. If we refresh the page, it's partially working, not completely, but this is what happens. So this is super helpful when you want to simulate stuff like some external API is not working, or some file fails to load, and what does your application do without it, right? And it's just good to know. All right. So network blocking. Let's go to the next one, recorder. So I mentioned that I'm going to have some of the new ones. So this is one of them. I think maybe only one of them. So let's open up the recorder. And what the recorder does is it allows you to record user interactions, and then you can use them in some way. So let's just start recording. Let's name it test, and I'll start the recording. I can scroll down. I can click on open source. It's going to scroll down, and let's make it that, right? So the recording is, okay, I visited the page, I scrolled down a bit, I clicked on the element, then it scrolled down again. Well, the application scrolled down, so we can delete that in the test case, right, or whatever it is. But we can add some more steps also manually. It can be waiting for element, it can be some kind of click, it can be some change, navigate, I don't know, whatnot. And this is great because not everyone has the benefit of hot module replacement, which we mentioned today already. And this is a nice way, or seems like a nice way, how to get into the same state of the application automatically without you having to go and click through it each time. At the same time, you can already export this script as a Puppeteer script. And in the future, I'm guessing Cypress and stuff like that, right? So I'm guessing in the future, we could see that people will just go, click around the application, create their own end-to-end test scenarios, and then, well, you know, no one likes to create end-to-end tests. So this is much easier. I was testing it out. It doesn't work that much. It didn't work for me, but it's super new, right? So it's exciting. I think in the future, I really like the idea of this. So that's the recorder. What's next? Rendering. So that's now we're getting to some parts that I use regularly, and that's okay. So for the rendering part, for example, there's a bunch of helpful kind of information and helpful stuff that you can enable. For example, paint flashing is something that most front-end developers should know, but most don't know about it. So this enables that each element that is repainting is blinking in green. I'm not sure if you can see it there. On this side, there is a canvas throughout the on the whole page. So it's going to be blinking all the time in the background, right? But that's what it's supposed to do. It's canvas. It's redrawing all the time. But for the rest of it, it's not repainting that much, even though it's moving. So that's what it's supposed to do, right? When we hover on this, it's repainting. Maybe that could be optimized. I don't know. So we want to get rid of repainting normally, and this is the way how you can easily test it. Sometimes you can see sites that are re-rendering all the time without it doing anything or you doing anything, right? So it's kind of performance heavy. And there's more stuff in here, like scroll performance issues that you can detect with it and all of that. There's no scroll performance issues on this site, so we're not going to see that. Another thing that you can find in here is like emulating different stuff. So one thing that you can emulate is like print media query, right? So you can see how the site will actually look like without printing it. You can see that I have this like links displayed suddenly and all of that stuff. So yeah, emulation. Another emulation that we have here is prefers to reduce motion. So that's something that people talk about a lot lately, and usually you would have to go into your system settings and change it there, see what it does. Here you can just disable it, and you can see that the blob stopped. Maybe you can see it. I don't know. It stopped animating because it supports it. When I enable it back, it should animate again. And then you can emulate all that stuff from here. There's more of it. Go check it out. Performance. Okay, so this is like the biggest part. And I feel like we could spend hours on performance because there is just so much information and so much useful stuff that you can find in there. But let's just record a slow video or slow, I don't know, what is it called? Profile. And use that as an example. And there's a few issues here, but it's just because I was kind of zooming out and stuff. Normally here, okay, sorry about that. All right, let's redo that. So on this site, we're going to see something like that. So what you can see here is the thing being separated into 16.7 milliseconds. So the computer is aiming for 60 hertz, right, or 60 FPS, which divides the second into those parts of 16.7 milliseconds. And it kind of does what it's supposed to do. Normally it looks better because I'm not sharing screen and stuff, but my computer is kind of dying, it's old. But yeah, even here it kind of does what it's supposed to do. It starts kind of at the beginning of that frame and it ends before it ends, right? So it's able to kind of render that stuff within that tick of a browser. What you can see here is that all those functions and stuff like that that are being called as a process of that animating on that bubble, right, for example. And in most cases, you can even click through into that source of like, where is that code? Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. I have Apple TV.
Yeah, but we don't
that's not it.
What about now?
Yes.
Thank you. It's 4:25.
Nice. All right. So we're back. For the most of them, you can even see where is the source of that function, right? So you can click through, you can see that there's some animate values and whatnot, and all of that stuff is happening there. Why is this important is usually this is how it's supposed to look. It should work this way. When it's important, I have a good example for that actually, because we use it a lot. When we were in Pipedrive migrating from one router to another, it was a big process, big and long process. And what happens there is like we ran into a lot of stuff where routing is something that is global, and any application can basically touch it, right? So what we ran into is redirect loops a lot. So one router was redirecting to one place, and the other one was redirecting back and stuff like that. And that just went into a loop, and usually it crashed the tap after some time, right? But it's something that is hard to find because any application can literally just go and do the window history, page navigation stuff. With this, you could just run the profiler for like, I don't know, a second, and you could clearly see that something is repeating very often or something is taking very long time. And you can even pinpoint it to source code even. So this is something that is super helpful in those situations where like, okay, you have such a huge code base like Pipedrive, and you have no idea where is it coming from, right? That problem, that performance issue, problem that you have. That's quickly on the performance. Then there's animations. Again, it's one of the tabs. This is not the best site for it actually. So let's open. Oh, I have the Pipedrive site over here, and let's open up the animation tab. So what you can do with that is slow down all CSS animations to 25 or 10%, right? So now it's slowed down to 25. You can check it out. And you can even replay it, but it works kind of funny for the most part, right? So yeah, so here we could see the replay of that one. God damn it. All right, once more. Right, and you can even kind of go back and forth and check out the animation. So what is this good for is when you see some really nice animation around internet where a lot of stuff is animating, like here, transform, visibility, opacity, everything, and it's nicely timed. You can actually go and steal it very easily in this way. So this is what I've been using it for. Last but not least, console lock. It doesn't matter who you are. You're either using console lock or you're lying, right? But this is not why I'm mentioning it. There's plenty of stuff in that console object that people kind of don't talk about. I have some examples actually prepared too. So let's refresh the page. Let's go into console and close this. That's not the right console. Is this? Yes, that's the right console. Okay. So first one is console group and console group end, I guess. So what this does is group your logs into, a group. So when you have a lot of console logs, you can separate those into a separate group and kind of filter it out from all the others. We use it in Pipedrive for Frontend. It's hard to explain about that. But yeah, if you have a lot of logs that you want to put into a group, make it part of something separate, this is a good way to go. Now, connecting to that is the group collapsed thing, right? So it's the same thing, but it just starts up collapsed. So if you have some information that you usually don't need, this is the way to display it. It's always there when you need it. You can go check it out, but for the most part, it's just hidden. There is more like console count. So with count, you give it some kind of name. First is not a good name, but call me please is called inside of function. If we call the function twice, we should see that call me please was called twice. So this is kind of saving you the work of creating some kind of index, increasing it in each time, and console logging it yourself, right? And what else is there? Console time. I really like that one. I actually didn't know about this one before today. But yeah, it's console time and console time end. Again, you give it some kind of name, and it gives you the number of milliseconds between those two calls, right? So here we're waiting for 1,000 milliseconds. You can never be certain it's going to be 1,000 milliseconds. It's more like 1,000 milliseconds or more. So it's a nice way, like here, right? So it's a nice way to kind of see if there's any performance issue, if something is taking more time than it should, or I don't know, whatever it is. There's more. There's a console table, and probably some more I don't know about. So yeah, go check out console documentation as well. And for the last part, there's what's new. So when you're in those DevTools, you can actually go into what's new. And it will actually show you with each version what is new in that version of the Chrome, which is super helpful. They even have this link to the YouTube video as well for each version. So yeah, you can always stay up to date, kind of. With that, that's it from me. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, now is the time.
For the great presentation, and I think that all of us learned something. I definitely did. So, are there any questions in the room? No?
Speechless.
Speechless. Well, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna have more of a personal question here. On your expertise, when do you think it is a good time to start actually on focusing user experience? For example, if you would be a startup, you'd be developing MVP. Yep. When is the right time to actually, focus on these performance things and just overall improving the user experience?
Focusing on performance or developer performance?
I would say for the product user experience, so even the performance.
Okay. Yeah, for me, until it's not a problem, I wouldn't focus on it at all. Like you always have stuff to do in startup world, right? And until it becomes something, well, I wouldn't say critical, but something that you hear a lot about, and you will hear a lot about it if there is a big problem. I don't think you should focus on it. I don't think you should focus on like React optimizations or anything like that. You should just focus on, I would say, DX, right? So you need to develop quickly. You need to be able to develop quickly and be comfortable kind of with it, the whole team, right? I think that's the most important part.
Right. Any more questions? Right in the back.
Breakpoints or console log?
Thank you.
Would you prefer breakpoints or console log?
Oh, okay, I didn't get that. I think for me it's always breakpoints, but only now that I kind of got used to them. I was always console logs, but it's not like I don't use console logs, right? you just kind of go there and throw it in there automatically and be done with it, right? But yeah, right now I think I'm more of a breakpoints guy because I just got used to it.
Thank you very much. So, any more questions? No. I actually do have a question. Like, what resources would you recommend if you wanted to learn more about developer tools? Is there any documentation on the Chrome?
Yeah. So all those links, that's what's new, is actually leading to Chrome documentation, right? So they have a page on each version, and there should be even a list of all versions, right? So 99, that's not it. On this page, there's somewhere the list of all versions as well. So when you click through that link in what's new, you're going to find it. for sure. All right, here we go. So what's new in DevTools? And they have all those, the list of all Chrome versions.
Okay, thank you very much. There are no questions on the stream, so I think we are just ready to wrap it up. So one more clap for Georgie from Pipedrive. Thank you very much. And as this was the last talk for this evening, I would like to invite you to stay here as long as you want. I think that it is planned that we will move to a pub at 9 p.m., so it's in about an hour. So until that time, there's a free beer. There's, I think, still some food left. So go ahead, take whatever you want, and have a great rest of the evening. And I hope to see you here again on the next part of our Frontend talk.